It's important to recognize that because we see the world through a system of frames based on past experience, new information must fit into an individual's existing set of frames. So simply telling a person the facts is only effective if the facts fit into that person's frames, or we might say their experiences and worldviews. In 2016, the personal email account of Hillary Clinton's campaign manager was hacked in a phishing attack. WikiLeaks published his emails, and people from the extreme right, hoping to discredit Clinton, claimed the emails contained coded messages that connected high-ranking Democratic Party officials and some restaurants with an alleged sex trafficking ring, a child sex ring. One of the establishments allegedly involved was the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria in Washington, D.C. Members of the alt-right spread the conspiracy theory through channels such as 4chan, 8chan, and Twitter, and Pizzagate was born. Some of you have probably heard of Pizzagate. This resulted in all sorts of shenanigans, but one of the things that came out of this was a man from North Carolina traveled to the pizzeria in Washington and fired a rifle inside the restaurant, trying to break the lock on the door of a storage room that he thought the sex trafficking ring was on the other side of this door, and he was convinced of that. So since then, Pizzagate has been proven to be baseless, but it is generally considered one of the main predecessors to the QAnon conspiracy theory. Interestingly, Pizzagate researched last year during the election and leading up to the election, mainly due to QAnon. So initially, QAnon and Pizzagate were spread only by the far right, usually known as the alt-right, but it's now been spread, particularly last year, by people who don't otherwise fit a right-wing conspiracy theorist mold. It's been spread through TikTok and other avenues. And I've kept a few people on my Facebook connections just to see what's going on who are big into the QAnon conspiracy theory. So it's well entrenched in Canada as well. The conspiracy theory has developed and become less partisan and political in nature, with less emphasis on Clinton and more on the alleged worldwide elite of child sex traffickers. So this is a conspiracy theory that has evolved, and so it has remained relevant because it's been able to evolve. Although, since the insurrection in Washington and Joe Biden's inauguration, it seems as though some of the wind has been taken out of QAnon sails. So we'll see if it continues to grow, or maybe it has had its day. In any case, the reason I bring this up is because QAnon is kind of an interesting thing. It has grown really exponentially. Now we can probably think, well, part of that might have to do with the rise of the alt-right. We've seen a growth in this extreme right-wingism since Trump has become president in the US, and this has spread up into Canada. So that might be part of the reason that it has had such success. It also has probably had success because of the pandemic year. I mean, a lot of people are feeling frightened. Conspiracy theories often prey on fear and isolation. And isolation seems to be one of the big drawing points of QAnon. QAnon gives a home, gives a people or a common sense of purpose to a group of people. People who embrace QAnon, they can put up videos and they can talk about QAnon and they can get lots of likes from other QAnon people, and they can feel like they're part of something. They can feel like they know something that other people don't know. They're in on the big secret. So these are common indicators of conspiracy theories and cults and all of these things. But there are some unique elements to QAnon that also make it particularly palatable to people. And one of them is that people who express an interest in QAnon are generally encouraged to do their own research, to come to their own conclusions about QAnon and the veracity of this. I believe there's supposed to be some dark Q figure in the background. So people are encouraged to do their own research on the internet to learn more about QAnon. Well, of course, if you are researching on the internet about QAnon, you're all going to come to the same conclusions because you're tapping into the same information, watching the same videos and the same people saying these things and connecting these apparent dots. And so this idea that you are coming to your own conclusions, though, you are seeing patterns on your own, and nobody is telling you what to think, but you are finding out this information. And so this is how you're in on the secret. This is very appealing to people. This is how they fit something like QAnon, which initially seems so nutty, into an existing set of frames. People are out there searching, they're looking for something to feel like they belong, and then they are encouraged to learn about QAnon on their own. And so they do. They do this research. They cover the same ground, they come to the same conclusions, and they feel like they came to these conclusions entirely on their own. So this is very powerful, and this is one of the reasons that QAnon has been successful, because people feel like they've figured this stuff out on their own. They have been able to process this information and place it within their own frames, as though it emerged organically, which of course it didn't, but that's the impression that people get. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. Okay, so why do we care about that? Well, that has a lot to do with how we give things a feeling of salience and how new frames have the ability to emerge, or how we might come up against a lack of framing for a particular issue. So people do not often have the frames to integrate knowledge or understanding about sustainability issues. Here's a good example. If I say the word genocide, you might conjure up maybe a black and white image of skeletal prisoners of a World War II concentration camp. Or maybe you'll think of the iconic images of the Rwandan genocide, or maybe you have more personal experience of one of these tragedies. But nearly all of us have strong negative associations with the term genocide. It's a horror. It should never happen again, and so on. Now let's look at a couple of concepts here. Biodiversity loss, the sixth great extinction. If we think about these for a moment, these are pretty grim topics. But do they have weight in our imaginations? Do we have the frames to actually make these concepts feel real? I would say that we generally don't. So we can think of genocide and we are filled with these, our minds are filled with these images of these horrors. If we think of biodiversity loss, well, what do we think of? I guess maybe we might have a picture in our head of, a forest that's been logged. Maybe we have that picture. Maybe that's what we think of. But do we have the same frames that we have for something like genocide? Yet think about it for a second. If we're talking about biodiversity loss, we're not talking about genocide at all. Genocide is the destruction of a single part of a single species. Biodiversity loss, we're talking about the extinction of entire species, and many entire species. And then the extinction of these entire species not just part of a single species, and that's not to, in any way trivialize genocide, because genocide is horrible. What I'm trying to get across is that biodiversity loss is at least as equally horrible as genocide, yet we just can't quite wrap our minds around it and think of it in those terms because we lack the linguistic frames. We lack the reference points. The sixth great extinction, my God, this is horrific, and it won't just end up with, a bunch of species that we maybe don't even know about dying off. This will impact humanity as well in ways that maybe we can't even imagine. And of course, that is part of the problem. So, not to get too grim on you, but these are pretty significant issues. Yet, how do we imagine them? They're very difficult to imagine. And Lakoff talks about this, hypocognition. Hypocognition is the lack of ideas we need to describe the issues we face with the environment. So, let me show you one of the frames that we do have. We do have this frame in our minds that humans are somewhat disconnected from the environment. The environment is not the best word to describe the environment because it already comes with its own set of frames. When we think of the environment, we think of something that's over there somewhere. We humans, we're over here, and the environment is somewhere over there. And this could not be further from the truth. Humans exist within the environment. We are part of the environment. We live or die within the environment, and we have an enormous impact on the environment. So we are integrally connected to the environment. So how can we make this work in terms of framing? Well, here's a good example. I put across the idea of biodiversity loss, and this is a terrible term to try to express this really challenging concept. More recently, we've heard this term ecocide, and I think that this is probably a better term to describe something like biodiversity loss. It's less clinical, and it marries this idea of ecology with genocide. So what we're doing is we are taking an idea that might be somewhat alien to many people, and we are connecting it to an idea that has strong existing frames. So eco and side, we put those two terms together, and we can start to feel a little bit of emotion with it. So this is one of the ways that we can create new frames.